Hi, and welcome to another episode of a Face Project podcast, stories told by people from around the world that broaden our understanding of the human experience. My name is Natalie Jennings. I'm your host, and this is episode number 12. Welcome to a Face Project podcast.
It's just pure life. It's pure
and my
innocence.
mom
it's
is a
pure
writer.
gratitude.
So I ended up in America.
I am an adopted Korean and have been all my life.
It's a perfect blend of science and creativity.
I was screaming, I will live over here till I die.
In this episode, Kelly speaks a lot about work and inspiration and art. And I know in the past we've featured quotes from other folks. Instead, I just found a couple that really resonated that I wanted to share with you. The people who get on in this world are the people who get up and look for the circumstances they want. And if they can't find them, make them. George Bernard Shaw. To be successful, the first thing to do is to fall in love with your work. Sister Mary Loretta. You are what you do. If you do boring, stupid, monotonous work, chances are you'll end up boring, stupid, and monotonous. Bob Black. Before we dive into Kelly's story, I just want to remind everyone of a couple of things at afaceproject.com. If you head on over to the website, you can find links to subscribe to and order the latest issue of our quarterly magazine. The quarterly is available in print and digitally in our online store. Just head on over to afaceproject.com and click on the shop menu. You'll also find links under the shop menu to contribute. It takes a small team of us to put this magazine and podcast out on our regular schedule. And if you are a listener or a reader of the magazine and you are enjoying the stories that you're hearing, consider offering a monthly donation, very much like you would public radio or public television. A small monthly donation helps tremendously towards all of the things that we do here to keep this project moving forward. Again, head on over to afaceproject.com and look under the shop menu.
My name's Kelly and I'm from Deep Haven, Minnesota. And I live in Minneapolis now. I'm moving to Milwaukee, my husband's homeland, literally with my in-laws. So. Yeah, my mother-in-law she's 75 and she's an incredible seamstress, and she has her entire downstairs is a sewing atelier. So she has a singer waiting for me so we can sew together. I do quilts. My whole family's quilters. And ever since I was little, my aunt will make me a quilt, or my mom will make me a quilt, and they'll let me pick out the fabric. And I'll pick the fabric out in 20 minutes for the whole quilt. And my aunt and the ladies like that will always say, I don't know about that quilt. They're like, I don't know about these colors, but then they always love them when they're done. It's just, yeah, so it's funny, but it takes me a really long time to cut and imagine the mathematics of quilting. And I've always kind of collected little scraps. I was kind of a wild dresser when I was little. But I never saw that as textiles. So I was quilting and realizing that I felt so different, such a different level of accomplishment. And then I started to realize it was sort of the thread that, I guess pun kind of intended, but not really. It really started out with I loved jewelry, I loved art. And the more places I went, I saw these patterns. and then realized that they were translated into textiles. So it felt really different, and I just realized I needed to go. It really was like a light bulb turning on that I needed to go back to school. I did an embroidery class in Sweden. It was in the summer and literally on the edge of the woods in Dalarna, Sweden. It was an incredible space for grad school, and it would be like 8 hours of women just basically being silent in the class, no music, not really, like light conversation, but it was like a palpable energy in the room. Our instructor's talking in Swedish, but she's also brought textiles from all over the world. She's really like a global textile artist, even though she's Scandinavian. So we didn't really speak Swedish, but we kind of understood, and she'd come and physically show us, and it was a really different method of teaching than I think I had been teaching in classrooms when I went there, and we're so used to like looking around, making sure the kids, everyone's at the same step, everyone's on the same page. And there it's like and this is our Swedish Lloyd practice too, but they almost let you kind of flail just until you're ready to give up, and then they give you a little, which is a more traditional, almost like when people used to study trades, like you actually study and have to work problems out on your own. So she showed us all these patterns and examples of similar aesthetics she went to India, she went to Gujarat, she'd been all over. So I think this trip really did solidify wanting to connect with people that way, because it was a room full of people that didn't speak the same language, that were just working with their hands. I think it was the next summer after I finished school that I went to Cultural Cloth in Wisconsin. It's a really beautiful white, modern-looking building, but then you go in and it's so much color and texture, and they have a big area in the back that they have quilts and old ikats from Uzbekistan and huge pieces, like how they have posters. They used to have posters at the MIA you can flip through. So they basically have these big arms you can flip through the textiles, and you can literally stand sandwiched in between these textiles. They have big felted wool rugs from Kyrgyzstan up on the walls. They work with women in India. I really just felt like the energy in that room, because so much work goes into these pieces. There's so many stories that it's hard to understand when you look at them, all the work and all the energy that goes into every piece. I just stood there and looked around and was like, okay, this is it. I don't know in what form, but it's textiles, whatever it is. But then I went to Norway because I'd always been interested in, my family was from there, and I just loved the motifs. And so there was this tiny little place in Norway, in Bergen, and I walked in, and in Norway they still have traditional costumes that actually most Norwegians still have. They'll wear them for national holidays or birthdays, and they're called a bunad. And then in Sweden they're called folkdräkt. Please excuse my pronunciation, anyone listening to this. But they're really elaborate traditional costumes with jewelry and ribbons, and depending on your region, they're really different. The colors, the weaving, even what they're made out of, the embroidery. So I went into this little atelier in Bergen, and there was literally little Norwegian grandmothers above making these costumes still. And the woman said, well, the only ones that can be made in this area are from this region. Sort of like the idea of French cheeses and champagne, that they're, like regionally specialized by the name. So that had just never occurred to me that something could be so specific and special. It sort of planted a seed. She gave me this full color, beautiful book on the folk costumes. So I started to kind of become aware of that, about looking at that, seeing where things were from. And then a couple years later, I went to Egypt, and I just started to see all these connections between folk costumes, embroideries. But Egypt was just aesthetically different. Some days you can be in France or be in somewhere and kind of forget that you're somewhere else. And I think every second that I was in Egypt, I never forgot I was somewhere else. Like, it smells so different. It sounds different. It was incredible. It really changed my worldview. I feel like geographically places have been so different, but they've sort of taught me specifically about the making of things. Things can be so useful and beautiful, not just despite their everyday use, but maybe even because of their everyday use. I went to Peru this year. I just felt like I had to go. Something was really pulling me there. And we were in Cusco, but then we also got to go to a place called Queros, the Queros Nation, which is at about 16,000 feet. There's no roads. You have to take a horse and then hike in there for about 3 hours. It's really incredible. People live in stone huts, so it's very rustic, open fires. But people are incredibly dressed and just do honestly incredible weaving. And it's also a really physically challenging lifestyle. I mean, they herd alpacas and llamas, which they spin the wool from. They have so much work to do every day just to get their food, just to sort of sustain themselves. But they're constantly making things. So I've never been anywhere where it was more intertwined, like your art and your daily work. And I feel like here in my life in Minneapolis, I had been like, oh, well, I have to have a normal job, and then I have to do my art, in parentheses afterwards, and it's hard, and it really changed my idea of what's possible, but also of what it means to be successful, because I started to realize it was engaging all these skills. Like, I really felt alive, even though it didn't feel like I landed like a big job after my master's, which I thought I needed to do. My husband and I were both talking about that he's a musician, but also, works kind of a 9-to-5. And we were both saying how we really want to move towards having work be our work, like our life work. And not feeling like we're getting up in the morning to go to work, but just that we're going to do our work. I guess some people call it dharma. I like that idea of it because it's the work you were sort of put on this earth to do. So your dharma could be to be an amazing plumber or tech person. It's sort of like the gifts you bring into the world and how you can share them with people. That's my interpretation. If we can all work on doing our dharma, then we're making the space better for everyone. Like, I kind of see it as getting to be your highest self. I mean, at least where I come from, we're really encouraged to be great at things, which is good. It's good to have high expectations. But I also think we miss this chance to just do something to do it. I just realized, it's okay. And I said, it's okay to try. It's okay to do things just for the sake of doing them and trying. Take a couple banjo lessons or take a weaving class just to take it and experience it. And you don't have to keep going. You don't have to become an expert. I feel like we just don't talk about that much, that it's okay to play soccer recreationally and not be on the traveling team or, whatever your version of it is. And it's okay to just experience things. Yeah, Cardamom Collective is my company now, and I named it Cardamom Collective because cardamom is a spice that's really evocative for a lot of people. It's used in India, it's grown in it's used in Guatemala, it's used in Scandinavia. So for a lot of people, it's like childhood, sort of visceral memories. Cardamom is really strong, and I wanted it to be something that people from all over the world could relate to. And then I wanted Collective to be a gathering place for people that wanted to try things, make things. I enjoy making things from other places because it ties into learning about those places. So I want the bottom line sort of to be education. And I hadn't mentioned this, but the other aspect of Cardamom Collective is that we have a strong social commitment to teaching people about the ethics of where we get things and how we can help people and how connected we can be when we do that. The fast fashion industry is extremely damaging, not only socioeconomically, but environmentally. So I think it's an easy way to sort of cast your vote. Really just make an effort to spend a couple dollars more on your t-shirt or your next pair of jeans, or go thrift shopping. If you can buy repurposed clothes, or look at their labels. Think about who's making their clothes, who's benefiting, and it's probably the best place to start for most people. I try and be sensitive when I talk about these things because I don't think people need to buy, $100 pairs of jeans, or some of the things are more expensive, but it's important if people can make good choices, like if you're able to. But I definitely recognize that some people have to just make choices and feed themselves too. So I think if everyone can kind of steer the ship a couple degrees, like buying good things, but also just buying less, having less. And if we all just literally thought about it when we did it, even if you get to the store and maybe you can't do it that day, but having that intention of being more aware, and then it really becomes kind of fun because you see differences, you do feel good. I don't think people have to go throw out all their stuff and, well, maybe start over. I don't think that's a good answer at all, but if people just start to move towards that, I think of it as a movement. And I like that idea of shifting, just little shifts. When my husband and I go to one of the nice coffee shops in Minneapolis, sometimes we spend $20 in the morning on a couple lattes and our baked goods. So it's also shifting where we think about spending our money. It's, a $30 t-shirt seems like a lot of money, but it's just about shifting our perspective about where we spend our money.
This episode was recorded and produced by Daniel Zamzow and me. Web layout and design by Aaron Woods. Music by soundimages.org. If you'd like to see photographs of Kelly and many of the fabrics and textiles that she is so passionate about, head on over to afaceproject.com. Look under our podcast menu, and there you'll find episode number 12, Kelly. If you're listening to us on iTunes, we would really appreciate it if you could take the time to swing on over and leave us a review of the podcast. Reviews help us to reach more people and increase our rankings on iTunes and elsewhere. So if you get a chance to do that, if you like what you're hearing, we really, really appreciate it. That does it for this episode. We will be back with another story in a couple of weeks.
I know the word journey can sort of sound overused, but that really is what it is, that being okay with the movement, the process, there isn't really an end destination maybe. At least it's okay to do your art that way. It might not look like what you thought it was going to do when you started, but just to try and be open to the process.